We begin today the Gemara on Daf Gimel Amud Beis, 6 lines up from the bottom of the Amud, where it says Mechti. The Gemara here, we have to remember what it says in the Mishnah in order to understand this Gemara. First of all, the Gemara is focusing on the word Maveh. One of the 4 Avos Nezikin in the Mishnah was Maveh. What is Maveh? So Rav says, the Gemara brought here, that Maveh refers to a person that's mazik. And he brought the source of a pasuk. Then Shmuel says that Maveh refers to the shoyer, the ox, that's mazik with his shein, with his teeth, by eating. And he brings a pasuk for that as well. Now the Gemara pointed out that the pasuk in this word Maveh, the way Rav brings from the pasuk, the way Shmuel brings from the pasuk, it's not meduyik. The word of the Mishnah Maveh doesn't fit 100% according to either opinion. So the Gemara now is going to focus on trying to explain, according to Rav and Shmuel, in the pshat of the Mishnah. Why did Rav say what he said and he disagreed with Shmuel? And why did Shmuel say what he said and he disagreed with Rav? Let's see. Zok the Gemara. Mechti, now let's see. Kroi loy kemar daiki v'loy kemar daiki. The source of the pasuk that both Rav and Shmuel brought, that Maveh relates to Adam, or Maveh means shein, it doesn't fit with the word of the Mishnah perfectly, not like Rav and not like Shmuel. So Rav, my time alone with Shmuel. So first let's understand, so then why didn't Rav say, like Shmuel's pshat, that Maveh in the Mishnah refers to the shein of the shor that's mazik? So the Gemara answers, the reason is because it already says shor before, Tana shor. The Mishnah already said shor, that the shor is a mazik, and v'chal mili the shor. Shor includes everything else, everything in the shor. What does shor include? Shor is keren. It could be mazik with its horn, with the shein, with the teeth, or with regel, with the feet. So you can't say that Maveh refers to the teeth because it already said shor. That's why Rav doesn't want to learn like Shmuel. So the Gemara,
but they say keren separate, they say regel separate.
Not in the Mishnah though. Not in the Mishnah. The Mishnah says shor. Not in the Mishnah. We had a brayso before which separated the different avos, the different things that there are that we see in the psukim. But in the Mishnah it says shor. So Rav says shor means everything. Keren, shein, regel, the different ways that a shor could be mazik. Says the Gemara, Shmuel Nami, if so, according to Shmuel's pshat, so this is a question. Hatanale shor, it says in the Mishnah shor, so doesn't that include already shein as well? How could you say that Maveh is the teeth of the shor that's mazik? So the Gemara answers, Omar Rav Yehuda, says Rav Yehuda, Tana shor lekarnoi. When the Mishnah says shor, shor refers to the shor that's mazik with its horns. And then Maveh, when it says Maveh, is l'shinoi. When it says Maveh, that's referring to the shor that's being mazik with its teeth. So Shmuel holds that the Mishnah actually divides shor into 2, keren and shein. Okay, so now based on this, the Gemara will try to explain the continuation of the Mishnah. What did it say after that in the Mishnah? Loi harei hashor karei hamaveh, v'loi harei hamaveh karei hashor. You can't compare shor to Maveh. You can't compare Maveh to shor. Now, according to Shmuel's pshat, these are 2 different parts of the shor. And what we're saying is you can't compare the hezik that comes from the keren of the shor to the hezik that comes from the shein of the shor, and the same thing vice versa. So now what does that mean? How do we explain this? It says the Gemara as follows. This is what the Mishnah means to say. You can't compare the keren when the animal is being mazik with its horns. When the animal is being mazik with its horns, it's not deriving any pleasure by doing this. Kiriya shein, so therefore you can't compare it to shein, sheyesh hana lazekai, where by shein, when it eats, it does have hana. So Taisus over here explains, what the Gemara means to say is, if the animal is being mazik without any hana, that means that the animal doesn't have such a drive to do it. It's not getting any hana out of it. So it's a kind of a hezik where it's easier to control the animal. So therefore, I would say that maybe only this kind of a hezik, you're obligated to watch it and guard it because it's easier to guard it. And if you didn't, you're pesheya, it's negligence. Shein, though, is harder to guard it because this is an animal. It eats, and it's much harder to guard it from eating. So if the Torah would only say keren, I wouldn't learn out shein from it. I would say yechayev only for keren and not for shein. On the other hand, says the Gemara, you can't compare shein, she'en kavanose lahazik. Shein, the animal is not angry, it doesn't have a desire to go and be mazik, it's just eating. Kiriya keren, you can't compare shein to keren, she'kavanose lahazik, where here the animal is wild and it goes and it's mazik. So here the Gemara is saying an opposite svara, that you would say maybe shein, it's easier to guard it from being mazik because it's not an animal which is wild, so you can control it. Whereas by keren, it has a kavanah to be mazik. It's so wild, so maybe there you can't guard it so easily. So maybe there the Torah didn't obligate you to guard it. That's what the Mishnah is saying, that the Torah had to write Shein and Keren, which in the language of the Mishnah is Sheir and Maveh, because I can't compare one to the other. Okay, that's the svara of the Gemara right now. But here, the Gemara actually asks that the svara would be the exact opposite. This is very interesting because the Gemara here makes like a 180 mamish in this svara. Says the Gemara, V'lav kavachaymahu. Wouldn't you logically say that the svara is the exact opposite? That there's a kavachaymer to say that shein kavanos el azik chayiv. If by shein, where the animal is not wild and it doesn't have a kavanah to be mazik, so you're going to be chayiv for that. Keren shekavanos el azik like kol shekain. So a keren which has a kavanah to be mazik, most definitely. If it was mazik, it's your responsibility. So Adarabah, here the Gemara is saying that when you see your animal has a nature of being wild, that it has a kavanah to be mazik, that's not a reason to say that you should be potter, because I can't control it, my animal is so wild. Adarabah. If you know that your animal has this nature that it could be this wild, so you have to even be more careful. You have to be more cautious with your animal, what it does when it goes in the public. Right? So the Gemara is saying that Kavanos Lahazik is a swara to be chayiv, not a swara to be potter. Rashi here says, or Taisva says, that it's the same thing also benegeh to the first swara. The Gemara before was saying that if it has hana, that's a svara of why you should be potter, because it's too hard for you to guard it. It eats, it has hana, it's too hard. No, the svara is the exact opposite. If you know that the nature of an animal is that it likes to eat and it has hana, so that's a svara that you should be even more cautious. So you should be chayiv because of the fact that it was mazdik with the shein. So why are we saying over here the way we're explaining the difference between shein and keren doesn't make any sense? So the Gemara tries to answer this by saying as follows: regarding keren, I can't learn shein from keren because one second. I would think to say midi dehave a eved va'oma. Maybe I could compare keren, which is again the animal being mazik, with kavana. It's angry and it's intentionally being mazik. So maybe I would compare to a person's slave or maidservant that are mazik, that also could be mazik somebody with kavana. Now, eved va'ama, when an eved and amma are mazik someone, lav, isn't it the fact that afagav the kavanos and lahazik, even though they're being mazik intentionally, afilo achi petiri, but nevertheless they're going to be potter. Right? And both they are potter, they're owned by their master, and they're going to be potter, and their master doesn't have to pay for this either. We'll learn about this later in the Masechta, that when an Eved and Amma are mazik, they're owned by their master, they don't have any money of their own, and they are potter, their master is potter. So hachanami loishna, maybe I should say that I see here, the Torah is saying, an Eved and an Amma that are mazik intentionally, and they're owned by the master, but nevertheless, I don't obligate the master to control them and to tame them, that they shouldn't be mazik. A person could have a slave that's wild, and that's too bad. It's not the master's responsibility to take care of that. The same thing over here. Maybe I could say, if you own a wild ox that's goring and being mazik, so maybe you should be potter for that. So I should compare it to Eved and Amma. That's why I can't learn out that Keren is chayiv from the fact that I see that if it's mazik with its teeth, with shein, that it's chayiv. So that the Gemara says, no. There would be no svara to compare the ox that gores with its horns to a person's slave or maidservant that's mazik. Amar Ravashi says, Ravashi, how can you compare this? Atu eved va'oma lav taimer abis puhu. Regarding a person's slave or maidservant that are mazik, isn't there a very, very good reason why we can't obligate the master to pay for what damage they cause? Because if yes, what's going to happen? What happens if this slave gets angry at his master? The master made him work too hard and he's upset at him. So what is he going to do? He's going to want to get his master back. He's going to go and light his friend's pile of wheat on fire. So now if you're going to obligate the master to pay for the misdeeds that his slave does, so that the master is going to have to pay for all of the stupid things that his slave does. So you can't obligate a master to pay for what the slave does. But you can't compare that to the shor that has no das of its own. By the shor, there's no such a problem. By the shor, the keren should be chayiv. If it's kavanos lahazik, that's a svara that you know how wild your animal is. That's more of a reason that you should be careful with it. So the Gemara is back to its original question: why are we saying that you can't learn out shein from you can't learn out keren from shein, because keren is kavanos lahazik? Adarabah, if it's kavanos lahazik, if it has an intention to be mazik, that's a svara that you should be even more careful. So therefore, the Gemara says you're right. We have to switch around the svaras and the exact opposite. Ela parachachi, you have to say, or parik, other girsa here is, you have to explain the Mishnah that says that you can't compare shur to mave and mave to shur, which is keren and shein, according to Shmuel. So you have to explain it as follows. You can't compare keren, which is in being mazik intentionally and is wild, to shein kavanah silazik, to shein that does not have kavanah to be mazik. So now the Gemara is explaining take that if the Torah would write only keren, then I would say that for keren you chayiv. Because keren, you see, your animal is wild, so you have to be cautious with that. By shein, it's not wild, so you don't have that expectation. So maybe it's not such a negligence. You didn't realize it's going to go and eat and be mazik. And the same thing also the other way around. And you can't learn out from shein, because shein has anah. So the fact that it has anah, this is something that you see that the animal has this nature, so you could expect it to want to go and eat. So you have to be careful to muzzle it. Keren, you can't compare it to keren. By keren, it has no hana, so it's not something you could expect. So you don't have to be so cautious with it. So the Gemara just flips around the svara taka according to what it said before. Adarabe, that kavana lahazik is a svara to be mechayev you, and hana lazeka is also a reason to be mechayev you. But they're different, so you can't learn them out from each other. This is the pshat according to Shmuel. So it says in the Mishnah shoir and mave. Shoir is keren and mave is shein. But now the Gemara says, what happened to regel? The regel my shaydei. What happened with regel? The Tana of the Mishnah leaves out the third element of the shayr that could be mazik with trampling with its feet. Where did that go to? Why doesn't the Tana mention it? This is the question on Shmuel. According to Rav, it's all included in shayr. So the Gemara answers, Kishehizik, Chava Mazik, the Mishnah in the end says, Atzada Shavish Behen, that this is your money, and Shmirasi Alecha. The Mishnah finishes off, Kishehizik, Chava Mazik, that you're obligated to pay for your possessions that are mazik someone. What is the tzad hashava coming to say? Lasuya regel. That's coming to add regel, that the animal that tramples with its feet will be chayiv. But the Gemara asks further, why v'lisnei behedya? Just like the Mishnah specifies separately keren and shein as two separate oves mazikin, so why doesn't it say also clearly regel? So the Elam Rava, so now the Gemara switches around this whole thing here. So Rava says the pshat we said before is not true according to Shmuel. We're going to have to say as follows. Why are we dividing shoir and mave according to Shmuel? Tana shoir l'raglei. When it says that the ox could be mazik, that means when it tramples with its feet. That's the shoir. That's the most natural thing for a shoir. Wherever it walks, it just tramples. And mave, what does mave mean? L'shinoi. When it eats with its teeth. Those are the two things that the Mishnah is specifying when it divides the two ovis of shoir and mave according to Shmuel. And now according to this, the way you have to understand the Mishnah, why you can't learn them out from each other, as the Mishnah continues, you can't compare regel that it's very commonly, it's mazik by trampling. Wherever it walks, it steps and things, and it's always mazik. So shein cannot be learned out from that, because shein, even though it eats often, but not the same as trampling with its feet. So therefore, if Torah would only say regel, I would say you have to guard it from where it walks, but I wouldn't know that you're responsible for the shein, that when it eats. And on the other hand, on the other hand, since the animal has a no when it eats, and that's something that motivates the animal to want to eat, so therefore that's something that you would have to be cautious about, but not regel, where the animal has no no from this hezek. So therefore the Torah has to write both. Those are the two oves of shoir and mave according to Shmuel. So now the Gemara says, the keren mai shaire. So now what happened to keren? So the animal being mazik by goring with its horns, that the Mishnah doesn't specify. Where did that go to? So now the Gemara says, Kishehizik chava mazik lasuya keren. Similar to what we said before, when the Mishnah finishes off those words, that if your animal was mazik, yichayiv, that goes on keren. So again, the Gemara asks, "V'lisnei behedye." Let the Mishnah say keren is a separate av, like it does regarding shoir and mave. And says the Gemara, "B'mu'adin mitchilasan kamayri." When the Mishnah brings the four avos nezikin, it's only including those that are mu'ad from the beginning. Mu'ad from the beginning means that you chayev to pay nezek shalem right from the beginning, because this is something which is ordinary for this hezek to happen. And that's by all the four avos nezikin, by the shoir, with the shein and the regel. This is something that is the nature of the animal to do. Or if you dig a pit, or if you light a fire, it's something that you chayev for right in the beginning, because it naturally will be mazik. Keren though is different. Betamin ulubisayf muadin. Keren, if an animal gores with its horns, because it's not usual for the animal to do this, so in the beginning it's called a tam. When it happens the first 3 times, you only chayiv chatzi nezek, half of the payment, and only later it becomes a muad. You have to pay the full payment. So like Kamairi, that the Mishnah is not specifying as a separate one of the dalad avos nezikin, and that's only hinted in when it adds kishehizik chava mazik to hint also to Keren. This is the pshat according to Shmuel. Okay, now says the Gemara, Shmuel, my time alayam karav. But why doesn't Shmuel agree to Rav? So the Gemara before already explained that Rav didn't want to say like Shmuel because Rav held that Shayr, Rav learned simple. Shayr includes everything that is in Shayr. Keren, Shein, V'regel. That's why I didn't want to say like Shmuel, because as we see here, that we have to squeeze the Mishnah to divide Shein, Regel, Keren. But now, why didn't Shmuel want to learn like Rav? Rav's pshat is very simple. Shayr includes everything in it of Shayr, and Maveh is Adam HaMazik. And the Mishnah, according to Shmuel, doesn't even mention Adam HaMazik, one of the most basic Avos Nezikin. A person that's Mazik, according to Shmuel, is not even mentioned in our Mishnah. So the answer is, Amalach, Shmuel will tell you, Isal Kedaitach Adam, if you'll say that Maveh means when a person is Mazik, Maketani Seifer. This says later on in the next Mishnah on Daf Tezvav, over there, the Mishnah lists also certain categories of Mazikin, and there it says, Shayra Mu'id. There the Mishnah actually is listing the different Mazikim that are a Mu'id right the first time that they're Mazik. And the Mishnah says, a Shayra Mu'id, once a Shayr gore 3 times, so he's a Mu'id, you know that it could be Mazik, and you Chayiv Nezek Shalim. And then there's actually another thing, an exception. B'shayr hamazik b'rishus hanizik. Even though usually a shayr that's mazik the first 3 times, it's a tam. You only chayiv chatzi nezek. That's only if it's mazik in your rishus or on rishus harabim. But if it walks into someone else's private property and there it's mazik, so there even the first time that it gores with its horns, you're going to be chayiv to pay nezek shalim. And Rashi brings over here, this is the opinion of Rab Tarfon that says that you chayiv, it's already a muad if it's in the rishus of the nizik. And Adam, and there the Mishnah says also Adam, an Adam, when he is mazik, the first time he's mazik, Adam muad la'olam, he's going to be a muad. So the next Mishnah spells out clearly Adam. So therefore Shmuel holds you can't say that Maveh in our Mishnah is Adam if the next Mishnah spells out Adam. So the Gemara asks, okay, so the Mishnah already said it later on, but why don't we count it as one of the 4 Avos Nezikin here together with the others? And says the Gemara, according to Shmuel, Beniske Mamin Kamairi, Beniske Gufa like Kamairi. Our Mishnah is bringing you the 4 Avos Nezikin regarding a person's possessions that are mazik, not regarding the person himself that's mazik. That's a different category. So therefore it's not brought over here. Frek the Gemara v'Rav Nami. So now if so, ask this on Rav. Hakatani Adam b'Seifa. It says already Adam in the next Mishnah. How could you say that Maveh in our Mishnah is Adam? Amalach Rav will answer you. It's a difference. Over here, the Mishnah is bringing Adam in one category, and there it's bringing Adam in a different category. Hahu l'mechshevei bahadi mu'adinu da'asa. Over there, it's counting in the categories of the different kinds of mazikim that are mu'adim from the beginning, that are chayiv nezek shalim from the beginning. That's the context that Adam is being brought there. In our Mishnah, Adam is being brought as one of the Dalad Avos Nezikin. It's not a repetition of the same thing. So it's not a question that it says later Adam, and here we include Adam in Maveh. So now the Gemara explains, according to Rav's Pshat, when it says in our Mishnah, Maveh. So Maveh refers to Adam, right? So how are we going to explain what the Mishnah afterwards says? Lo yarei asher karei Maveh, that you can't learn them out from each other. So before the Gemara explained it according to Shmuel. Now the Gemara is going to explain according to Rav, what does it mean that you can't learn them out from each other? Why not? Each one has to have a certain chumrah that I can't learn out the other one from it. So Omai loy harei, when the Mishnah says you can't learn out Shoyer from Maveh or you can't learn out Maveh from Shoyer, Hachi Kama. This is how we learn our Mishnah. You can't compare shayr when an ox gores or an ox damages in any way. Shemishalim is a kaifer. When an ox gores, you pay kaifer. That means if an ox gores and kills a person, so then there's a special payment of kaifer that you have to pay. We'll learn about it later in the Masechta. So that's a unique chumrah that you find by shayr. Kiriya Adam, you don't find this when a person is mazik. Sheim mishalim is a kaifer. Over here, there's no din of kaifer. When a person kills someone else, so if it was b'mezid, he's chayiv skila. If it's b'shaygig, then he goes into golus. But there's no concept of payment of kaifer. So here you see a chumrah regarding shayr that has to pay that you don't find by a person. So if the Torah would only write the hezek of shor, I would not learn out Adam from there. On the other hand, Adam, if the Torah would only say that a person, which is mazik his friend, that he's chayiv, I would have learned out from there that if you shor is mazik you chayiv, because over here I see shechayiv barba dvarim. In addition to paying the nezek itself, the actual damage, you also chayiv to pay another 4 things: tsar, the pain that was caused, and sheves, ripoish, the doctor bills, and baishes, the embarrassment. We'll see soon on Amud Beis. The Gemara is going to specify these details. So we see that by a adam amazik, there's a unique chumrah that you have to pay so much more. So maybe this applies only to a adam amazik if he's mazik himself, not to a shor. By a shor, there's no such a thing. You don't have these 4 things. Then the Mishnah concludes that but the common denominator of all these mazikin are shadarkan lahazik, that the derech is that they're mazik. That's how the Mishnah concludes. So on this, the Gemara asks, according to Rav's opinion, when it says shor in the Mishnah, shor includes even the shor that gores with its horns. Could you say that if you are talking also about keren, is it the derech of a shor to gore with its horns? If you would be talking only about shein and regel, yeah, that's the derech that it happens naturally all the time, but not keren. So how could we say on the keren, it's only when it gets wild, it's unusual. So how could he say it's dark lahazik? And says the Gemara, b'muad, when the Mishnah includes keren in the shor, it means after it becomes a muad, after it goes 3 times. Could you say regarding muad that now it's derech, that this animal is always going to be goring? And says the Gemara, yeah, even the iyayid, once this happened, once, twice, 3 times, and the owner was warned about this. So orchehu. Now we see the reason why Yechayev Nezek Shalom at this point is because it's basically been proven here that this animal is a wild animal. So yeah, at that point it's darkai lahazik even with keren. But the Gemara asks another question on Rav's pshat. Adam. Darkei lahazik. If we're including a adam in this tzad hashava of the nature of darkei lahazik, could you say about a human being that it's darkei lahazik? A person can get wild, but how could you say that it's an ordinary thing, that it's darkei lahazik? Says the Gemara, well, depends. B'yashan, yeah, while he's asleep, then it's the derech of a person. He's sleeping, he doesn't know what he's doing. It's the derech for him to be mazik. So the Gemara asks on this right away, Yashan darkei lahazik, it's the derech of a person when he's asleep to be mazik. Says the Gemara, yeah, kiyevin, the chayiv, or poshit, the person when he's sleeping, he stretches and he bends his body and stretches his body, or chehu. So that it is common for the person to be mazik. And what we're talking about over here is a person that was negligent. He went to sleep in a place, not in his bed where it's a safe place for a person to go to sleep. He lied down in a place where there's a bunch of expensive things there. And then while he's asleep, his body moves around without his awareness and he ends up being mazik. It's the derech for a person when he's asleep for his body to stretch and move around and to be mazik. So that's the darkei lahazik of the Mishnah. Okay, so the Gemara asks another question over here on Rav's pshat. What does it say afterwards in the tzad hashava, in the common denominator of the Avos Nezikin? Ushmirasan alecha. That to guard these possessions of yours that could be mazik is upon you. Says the Gemara, Adam, how could that language of the Mishnah be referring to maveh, which goes on the person himself? Shmiras gufay olav. You can't use the term shmiras son, that you're guarding them. You have to guard yourself. It should have said shmiras gufay. It doesn't fit into the language of the Mishnah. So that's the question on Rav in the language of our Mishnah. So the Gemara says this is not a question just on Rav. Well, the Taimech, according to your reasoning, even if you would learn like Shmuel, that in our Mishnah it doesn't speak about Adam, but we have it in a Braisa, so you're going to have to explain it in a Braisa anyways. Oh, the Tani Karna, so Karna taught in a Braisa, Arba Avos Nezikin. So Karna, he taught the 4 Avos Nezikin, and over there he didn't count Maveh, V'Adam Echad Men. He counted clearly Adam as one of the 4 Avos Nezikin, and over there he also said the same Tzad HaShaveh that our Mishnah says. So you could ask the same question. Adam shmiras gufa yalav. How could he use the term shmiras son alecha if by Adam it's not that he's guarding something else, he has to guard himself? So Ella kedamale Rabavo said to the Tana when he said over this brayso of Karna, Tani Adam shmiras gufa yalav. You have to add into the lashon of the brayso that it's not only shmiras son of his possessions that are upon him, but regarding himself, shmiras gufa yalav. He has to protect. He has to guard his own body to be careful how he acts. So Hanami here as well in our Mishnah, Tani Adam Shmiras Gufa Yalav. So you have to read in our Mishnah Shmiras Gufa Yalav that a person has to watch himself, how he acts, not only to watch the possessions that he has. But it's a similar concept. Shmiras Gufa and Shmira Son is that a person has the responsibility to guard himself and his possessions, that they should not be mazik someone else. Okay, but the Gemara is not done yet. The Gemara comes back here to ask regarding Maveh. So we had the two pshatim and Rav and Shmuel. Rav said Maveh is Adam. Shmuel says Maveh is Shein. And it brought a pasuk for each one of them. But here the Gemara is going to say, since the psukim that Rav and Shmuel both brought are not clear, they're not perfect in the language of the Mishnah, maybe there's another pshat we could say. Rav Mari asks, Ve'eme Maveh zeh mayim. Maybe Maveh is another kind of hezek, a damage that's caused by water. Where do you see that the term Maveh has to do with water? K'dichsiv, there's a pasuk that says, K'kedoyach eish hamasim, just like fire burns melted liquids, let's say like wax or different things like that. So mayim tiveish, so the water bubbles in the fire. So you see the word tive. The tive refers to the nature of water that bubbles in the fire. So maybe in our Mishnah, Maveh refers to the damage of water. Okay, so Tosfos over here has a discussion about this. What exactly was the Gemara thinking? How exactly should mayim be considered to be a separate damage? If a person leaves water on the floor, that's a toilda of boy. You left something on the floor which someone else could trip on and slip on it. So that isn't that like boy? So what exactly is this koyach of mayim that the Gemara is talking about? Tosfos says two pshatim. One of the pshatim Tosfos says is in a case where the person had let's say a gutter of water that's running in his rishus, and he's allowing it to spill out over into the rishus harabim. So it's different than a person that's just placing something directly in the rishus harabim like a boyer. It's water that's coming from his rishus. It's a different kind of a hezek. This is another pshat. Tosfos talks about this. There would be a svara to say that mayim is a separate av for itself, and we have here a language of a pasuk that supports this, that maveh means water. But the Gemara asks, this pasuk is not a good source. Why not? Because the word tiveh that actually does not go in the water. Because miksiv mayim nivu, is it saying that the water bubbles up in the fire, meaning that the term, if it would say nivu, mayim is a plural term. Nivu would also be a plural term. So then the word nivu would be referring to the water. That it's the water that bubbles in the fire. It says tiveh eish ksiv. What that means is the fire causes, it's the cause of the water to bubble. So the word tiveh goes actually on the fire. So not on the water. So the Gemara asks, if so, maskeflot of zvid, if so, maybe Maveh in the Mishnah refers to causing damage through fire. The chiksiv tiveh be'eshu, as you just pointed out, the term tiveh goes in the fire. So now, if says the Gemara, you can't say that because hihachi my hamaveh v'hahever. The Mishnah says Maveh, then it says hever. Hever is fire. It already says fire in the Mishnah. So how could Maveh be fire? Now, if you'll argue and say that maybe the Mishnah is saying Maveh and then it's spelling out that Maveh means hever, which is fire. But of course you can't say that because Yihachi arba shloisha. How could the Mishnah say that there's four of us, Nasikin? There's only three. Now, the Gemara presses further on and says, maybe you'll argue and say, that no, maybe Maveh is explained by Hever, and they're really one thing, but why is it counted as four? Because it already says Shoyer, the ox that's mazik, and there's Beitarti, and maybe the Shoyer has two in it, as we said before. Shoyer includes Shein and Regel. So maybe Shoyer counts for two, and then you have Bayer, and then you have Maveh, which is one, and the Hever is explaining Maveh, it's just fire, and that's four. Says the Gemara, you still can't say this, because Yihachi, if so, later on in the Mishnah it says, Loi zeh v'zeh sheyesh ben ruach hayim. That when the Mishnah compares Shoyer to Maveh, the Mishnah says they're not the same, but both Shoyer and Maveh have a ruach hayim in it. It's a living being. That's what the Mishnah says about Maveh as well. Says the Gemara, if Maveh means fire, Eish my ruach hayim ispe. Fire is not a living being. So you can't say that Maveh in the Mishnah refers to fire. Visu, besides that, my kahareya eish. Later on, the Mishnah it says that you can't compare Maveh to eish. So you see clearly the Mishnah that Maveh is not eish. So therefore, Maveh is not eish. Maveh is not mayim. What is Maveh? The machlekes of Rav and Shmuel. Either Maveh is Adam or Maveh is Shein. Sagt die Gemara Tani Ravishie Topna Braise Shloisha Asa Avis Nezikin. There are 13 sources of fathers of Nezikin that we see in the Torah. What are they? Shoymechinam. Shoymechinam, that is take something, an item from someone to guard it, and he has a responsibility. The responsibility of a Shem Chinam is not to be a pesheya, not to be negligent with it. If he's negligent, he's going to be obligated to pay. So when he's negligent, that's a mazik. You allowed it to get damaged. Or vashoyel, a person that borrows something. Here, his obligation, his responsibility is much more. He's responsible even if an einus occurs. So it's also a certain responsibility you have, and you're considered to be a mazik if this einus happens. Or a person that is guarding something and is getting paid for it. He's obligated, he's responsible for a gneva v'aved if it gets stolen or it gets lost. That's another category of a mazik. And v'haseicher, these are all psukim in Parshas Mishpatim. The seicher as well, there's actually a machlokes, whether seicher is compared to a shem mechinam or to a shem misachar. We'll see later in the Masechta. So these are right here, 4 avos nazikin. And then you have, when an adam is mazik, so there's different elements of the hezek of the adam that could be divided, as we mentioned already before. There's the nezek. When he's mazik someone, he has to pay for the actual damage itself. If you damage a person, so how do you evaluate the damage? You look at this person, how much what his value is if he was sold as an eved, how much his value was before and after you damaged him. Or tsar, you have to pay also for the pain. If a person's hand, you cut off a person's hand, how much would you be ready to pay that it should be happening without any pain? It can be done with pain or without pain, so you have to pay that. Viripui, the doctor bills. Sheves, the loss of work that he has because of the fact that his body can't work. And Baishes, the embarrassment that you have to pay. We'll see later in the Masechta, in Perek HaChovel, all the details about these payments. So you see over here, Nezek, Tzar, Ripui, Sheves, Baishes, these are 5 different payments here. And then
you said we're talking about nezek, not payments.
Again?
We're talking about
nezek. These are different kinds of payments. These are all payments for different things.
But he starts off saying
shoshas
and nezikin.
Correct. But these payments are as a result of the hezek that the person did. These are different elements of the hezek. Varba the maslisin. And then you add a 4 that it says in our Mishnah, hot laser. So this brings you to 13. That's how Rav Oishia counted this. So you have much more than what it says in the Mishnah. So the Gemara explains now, V'tana dida, my time Tani Hani. The time of our Mishnah that just counts 4 avos nazikin. Why doesn't he count all these? So we can explain as follows. Bishloim Shmuel, according to Shmuel, it's understood, as we already said before, Beniske Mamen Kamairi. The Mishnah, according to Shmuel, does not even mention a Adam that's mazik, because it's only talking about a person's property or possessions that are mazik. Beniske Gufa like Kamairi. When the person himself is mazik, our Mishnah is not speaking about that. So over here, according to Rav Oishia, we're talking about the various different kinds of shemrim. That's a adam mazik, and all the five things of nezek, tzar, ripui. That's beginning to get to a adam that's mazik. So the Mishnah doesn't talk about that. But Rav, according to Rav Lisni, let it mention all of these that are adam. There are various different categories of adam hamazik, the person's responsibility. So if the Mishnah says adam, let it say it. So the Gemara answers, Adarab, according to Rav, the answer is Tana Adam. It already said in the Mishnah Adam, Mave is Adam, V'chol milida Adam. Everything of Adam is included in that. So it doesn't spell it out as separate avos mazikin. According to Rav Oishia, the Mishnah already said Adam. So why is he spelling out in addition other mazikin as well? And says the Gemara, Trei Gavnei Adam, because he separates the category of an Adam that's mazik. There are 2 kinds of ways how an Adam is mazik. Tana Adam, the Azik Adam. There's a case where one person is mazik another person. That's one thing that's mentioned, and that's not what it's talking about in our Mishnah. And V'tani Adam, the Azik Shoyer. Then in our Mishnah, it's talking about an Adam that's mazik another person's Shoyer. That's mazik another person's possession. Rashi explains, how do we know this? Because in our Mishnah, one of the avos mazikin is boyer. As we're going to learn later in the Masechta, a person that falls into a boyer and gets damaged by that, you putter. So in our Mishnah, when it says boyer, it doesn't include a boyer that's mazik an Adam. So too in our Mishnah, when it says Adam, it doesn't mean an Adam that's mazik another Adam. It only means an Adam that's mazik another person's shoyer or any of his possessions. So therefore, Rav Oishia counts separately nezek, tzar, ripui, sheves, and baishes, which is an Adam that harmed another Adam. That's why those are counted separately. So the Gemara asks, if we're going to divide Adam this way into 2 categories, Ihachi, Shor Nami, Lisni Trei Gavnei Shor. So let's divide, so Rav Oishia should count more, he should divide an ox that damages also into 2 categories. Lisni Shor, the Azik Shor. Let's talk about a Shor that damages another Shor. And the Lisni Shor, the Azik Adam. And then you could say separately a Shor that's mazik an Adam. Why don't we divide this as well? So the Gemara says, I don't know. That there's no reason to divide it into two categories. Hi, Mai. Well, how do you compare? There's a difference. The reason we're dividing Adam into two categories is because when an Adam is mazik another person's ox, so over there he only pays nezek. That's it. And Adam, Dazik Adam, when one human being damages another human being, he pays additional 4 modes of payment. That's why we divide it separately, because it's a different kind of payment. When it comes to a shor that gores and damages, Mali shor Dazik shor, Mali shor Dazik Adam. There's no difference if it's mazik shor or if it's mazik Adam. It's the same kind of payment. So there's no reason to divide it separately. It just pays nezek. But now the Gemara asks, according to the pshat that we just said, the 4 different kinds of shomrim that have to pay for the lack of the responsibility, not guarding an object properly that they had in their possession, the Adam, the Azik Shoiru. This is a human being that's not being responsible with an object that he got from his friend. It can be an ox, it could be any other object. We just said that Rabbi Ishia counts Adam separately only because he wants to count an Adam that's mazik another Adam separately. But an Adam that's mazik a shor, that already said in the Mishnah. But these shomrim here is also an Adam that's mazik a shor. So why is he counting that separately? So the Gemara explains, no, this is also deserves to be in a different category because Katani, Tana, the Katani, sorry, that's part of the question. The Katani and Avaishi says it separately. So the Gemara answers, Tani hazeke biyadayim. The Mishnah is mentioning when a person is mazik something directly by hand, an Adam that's mazik physically with his hands. And then it mentions the 4 shomrim, even though it's also an Adam that's mazik a shor, but it's in a different way. You're not being mazik by hand. It's just a matter of negligence that you or for Gneva Aveda, for Oynes, he didn't protect it and guard it properly, and then the hezek happened on its own. You didn't do it by hand. And this is another av hamazik that the Torah is machadish, that even though you weren't mazik it by hand, you still chayiv. So that deserves to be in a separate category for itself. The Gemara brings weiter another brayse. Tani Rab Chia taught esrim varba of his nazikin. We can count 24 of his nazikin. And here he includes other modes of payment that you find in the Torah. Tashlumi kefil, a ganav that has to pay double when he steals. V'tashlumi Bava Kama, and then there's the ganav that has to pay 4 or 5 times as much. That's if what you stole an animal, and then you either slaughtered it, you shechted it, or you sold it, so you pay 4 or 5 times as much. Sorry, where am I over here? The ganav, the payment that the ganav pays, not the kefil, the first that you have to pay, the principal, the canon you have to pay. And the gazlan, a gazlan is different than a ganav. A gazlan is someone that does it directly and not hiding. Eidim Zaymimin that set false testimony on someone, and because of their testimony they caused damage, and then they were discovered, and now they have to pay for this. V'ha'aynes, a person that's ma'anes, he has a relation with a woman against her will, or va'amafata, he seduced her, and in both cases he has to pay a knas of chamishim kesef. Umaytzi shemra, a person that says a lie about his wife, that she had a relation with someone else, and then he has to pay meya kesef. That's another mode of a payment where you cause the damage, her reputation. V'hametame, you go and you make someone's trume tome. V'hamedame, you take the trume of a kain and you mix it with chulin. It's another kind of damage. V'amenasech, you take someone's wine and you pour it and you make it tame. Rashi actually says regarding these 3, metame, medame, menasech, this is not something that says clearly in the Torah, but it could be learned out from Adam, that's mazik. The Torah says by Adam, makin nefesh behemi yishalmena, that if you go and damage a person's property, so over here as well, you damage a person's objects that he has in one of these 3 ways. So these are additional mazikin. So we just counted another additional 11. Yeah. And then v'hani tleisar, the other 13 that Rabbi Ishia already said, ha'esrim v'arba. So together we have 24. So that's the 24 Abbas Mazikin that Rab Chia counted. So the Gemara now is going to continue and explain why Rab Chia counted these additional ones and why Rabbi Ishia did not count them. That there's different ways how to define what are Abbas Mazikin and what are not. Okay.